Before I became an educator, I actually had another career. For 10 years, I worked in marketing, advertising, and design. I was a graphic designer and illustrator. And when I did decide to become a teacher, my specific aim was to bring dynamics into the classroom, that sort of dynamic, multi-sensory sort of feeling. So I started teaching English in high school and junior high, journalism, yearbook, advisor, all the usual stuff. And after 3 years, I was burned out. At the same time, we had an opportunity to move to Australia, and I lived there for a couple of years. I homeschooled my daughters, who were 2 and 3 at the time, and taught them to read. I also worked at a small newspaper as a production editor in the area. But we did come back to the States, and I started substitute teaching again. And one of the classes that I discovered was a special ed class of mild to moderate, or sorry, actually moderate to severe students, multiple disabilities. And I was basically doing the same thing I'd done with my daughters for the past couple of years. What I discovered is that I could teach these kids to read in a relatively short amount of time, and nobody had actually tried before. I was working them out into mainstream classrooms. I was providing the accommodations. And the moment that sort of changed my life was when I was working with a student who was about 12 years old. And I was playing some song or another on the guitar and talking to her at the same time. And she did this maneuver where she rolls her eyes, and those of you who have teenage kids know all about this. What that told me at that specific moment was that inside, behind that sort of facade, that crust that's defined by the disability, is an average person. And over again, I've discovered that to be true. And from that point, I never looked back. When I first started out in special education, I had the very good fortune to work alongside one of the founders of the Bridge School, Dr. Marilyn Buzelich, who's a communication and augmentative communication specialist. She turned me on to assistive technology through IntelliTools, and I've taken that a bit further. The second sort of component to that is a conference that I attended watching autistic people and people with cerebral palsy use augmentative communication devices. And at first I didn't believe what I was seeing. These are people who had no ability to speak as you and I do. They were using these devices to have the most eloquent conversations I'd ever seen. And that moment there really changed my outlook as to what could be accomplished using technology. It's not all about expensive technology. It's not all about purchasing high-dollar software. It's more in how you use, how innovative you are in sort of providing learning environments that are dynamic for students with disabilities. Everybody has different needs. Well, what do you have in your toolbox as an educator to bring that student to the knowledge, to help them communicate better, to help them understand better, to help them comprehend what needs to be done a little bit better? I think that's the root of innovation, to tell you the truth, whether it's in the mainstream classroom or the special education classroom. There's a lot of different ways to do things, and it helps to know about those things. That's innovation. From the beginning, I've looked for newer and better ways to help my students merge with the mainstream educational community in meaningful ways. A good example of that was in Washington, where for 6 years I was the coordinator for the school's daily television broadcast. First thing in the morning for 10 minutes, we broadcast news, weather, and sports to the rest of the school in every classroom. Mainstream students did the reporting, they did the research. I was the one who wrote the grants to procure the cameras and all the technology that was needed to bring this thing to television. It was a great vehicle to build school spirit, but it was also a fantastic opportunity for my students to work alongside their mainstream peers in a meaningful setting. where they were participating in running the equipment or even stepping in front of the cameras for speaking parts. Beyond that, on a day-to-day basis, you look for opportunities to work into the general education classroom. Now, I've never taken my students and just sort of dropped them off and said to the general education teachers, it's your job to find the differentiated instruction and the accommodations for my students. I generally know my students' needs a little bit better, and I look for opportunities to try to provide the accommodations in an unobtrusive way that flows and merges naturally with what's going on in the classroom, depending on what the teacher's style is. I think we've been real successful in providing that level of inclusion. I've been fortunate over the years to work with so many individuals from so many different backgrounds, linguistically, culturally, intellectually. It's taught me what I need to know to make education more meaningful to students and their families who bring them to school. Right now I'm working with students who are primarily Spanish-speaking, and I'm not necessarily fluent, but what I do know, I employ 100% of in the day-to-day instruction of those students. Some lessons that I give to students are done completely in Spanish. But I think more importantly is the communication that I send home to the parents. I do newsletters once a month, and they don't just get sent home in English. I translate those things into Spanish using a program on the computer, Babelfish. Likewise, I also send home regular communications to the parents that I get translated, and I send those home in Spanish. The parents understand that the Spanish isn't exactly the Spanish that they know. Some of it seems stilted to them, or sort of a pidgin Spanish, I guess. But they appreciate the effort, and I think that's what's important, because it helps them be more communicative with the school. It helps them feel like they have a stake in the school, and it helps them be more supportive in what we're trying to do in terms of the goals and objectives that we have. Very important for educators to be leaders in their schools and districts, but more importantly in the communities where they live, to help make those communities a better place in which to live. I've certainly served on numerous committees and cabinets, and I've also volunteered for many, many fundraisers for my school. I served as chair for my district's Special Education Program Council. But beyond that, I was a board member for the local Youth Symphony Orchestra to help make that thing a going concern. I was a volunteer public relations coordinator for the county's Department of Emergency Management. I was even a trainer for the American Red Cross in Seattle. There are many, many opportunities to help make your community a better place, and that's really why we're here. Education is one part of it, but dedication to the community and to our fellow human being is paramount in my mind.